Peter Greste is a free man after spending 400 days in a Cairo jail. He is one of 3 Al-Jazeera journalists convicted by Egyptian authorities on charges that include aiding a terrorist group. One of the other imprisoned journalists may be freed soon, and for the latest on the release, I'm joined by CCTV's Greg Navarro.
Elaine, Peter Greste is getting used to life outside of jail after spending, as you mentioned, more than a year behind bars. He was flown to Cyprus upon leaving, where he is at the moment with his brother Michael. You have to remember, all of this happened extremely quickly. It was a day his family said they hadn't given up on seeing, but one they said they were still very surprised to see. The family of Peter Greste wore the kind of smile the cameras had not seen for 403 days.
It is indeed a good morning.
Yes.
His parents and brother Andrew talked with reporters after learning that Peter Greste had been deported from Egypt after spending more than a year in jail.
We've spoken with him recently, and Peter firstly wanted to thank all the people who have supported him, who have given time, money, energy in seeking his freedom.
Greste and 2 colleagues, Mohammed Fahi and Bahar Mohammed, were convicted by Egyptian authorities in 2013 of charges including defaming Egypt and aiding terrorists. The cases and sentences provoked international outcry. News of Greste's release was aired in Egypt, where the Australian and Fahi were eligible for deportation under a newly enacted law, allowing foreigners to serve their sentences in their home countries. Word of Greste's release quickly spread around the world.
I spoke to Peter Greste shortly after his release and before he departed Egypt. He was immensely relieved and he was desperate to come home to Australia.
While the news was welcomed by the Greste family, it was bittersweet for colleagues of the 2 journalists who remain jailed.
It's a day of very mixed emotions, and I think we've got to focus on the fact that Bahar and Mohammed are still behind bars 400 days after being taken into detention, and that injustice needs to come to an end. They are guilty of nothing apart from great journalism.
That fact was not lost on Peter Greste.
Straight up, he's not going to forget his 2 other colleagues. There's no doubt that his excitement is tempered and restrained, and will be until those guys are free.
Peter Greste has spoken publicly since, granting his first interview to his employer, Al-Jazeera, where he said that all of this came as a complete surprise to him, that he was in fact settling in for months behind bars at the very least. He said he also feels a great amount of angst at the fact that his 2 colleagues, 2 men whom he now calls brothers, remain in an Egyptian prison. As for when he's returning here to Australia, his mother addressed that question yesterday, well aware of the global media attention focused on her son, saying he'll come home when he's ready and not before. Elaine?
And Greg, what's the likely fate of those 2 other Al Jazeera journalists that you mentioned still being held in Egypt?
Well, that's a very good question. At the moment, we can tell you the Canadian Foreign Affairs Minister said this morning that Mohammed Fahi's release was imminent. Remember, he has both an Egyptian and a Canadian passport, and that he would, in fact, be deported just along the same way, in fact, as Peter Greste did, but no further information was given. The future is less unclear for Mohammed, partly because we're told that he does not, at the moment, possess a foreign passport. So all of this is something we will continue to watch.
All right, Greg Navarro reporting live for us from Sydney.